Welcome to Welly's World. I'm Matt Wellman. Today, after some technical difficulties, I've got with me a very hip dude. He grew up in the jazz capital of what I would consider the world, New Orleans. Got to do some writing for himself in the music industry, as well as starting to play and compose for some Disney artists. And here I have with us Mr. James Gray.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. Glad to have you. So let's start talking about what was your first instrument? When did you start playing music?
I actually didn't start playing music until like senior year in high school. I played piano, but before that it was more performing. So performing in front of family, doing all kinds of renditions of Michael Jackson. At 5 years old, I still can remember performing for my family, doing all of these different Michael Jackson songs and stuff like that. But I would walk around with a little cup and go around and collect money from them after each performance. You know, it's a way for me to buy my candy and bubble gum and all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
So, even at that age, you know, just performing and having that stage presence.
Awesome. So it's like before you even had like what we would consider any sort of classical training of any sort. You didn't do band. Did you have music in school at all?
Nope, not at that time.
So
kindergarten. I didn't start like flutophone until third grade. So
yeah.
I really had no instrumental experience at all.
Just lots of
It's
listening.
just listening. Yeah,
Lots of
listening.
So with just listening to music, you found enough drive, enough kind of basic ideas to go forward and start to make something for yourself.
Right. I think it was more like the rhythms. I could hear. I could decipher certain sounds. Like I knew what certain instruments were within, you know, a fully composed song that I would hear on the radio. I could say, oh, that's a saxophone, or I really like, you know, the melody that the trumpet is playing, or whatever the case may be. I didn't know the technical terms at that time, but I knew what I heard, you know.
So yeah, you maybe didn't have the language, but you knew the difference. You could hear. You had a pretty good ear then,
right,
to start off with. So you told me a story about you and your cousin in Sizzler or someplace.
Yeah. And I don't even remember what the restaurant was, but at 12 years old, that's when I found like lyricism and found that I could actually write my own music. Before that, I think I copied words to like Boyz II Men, or even Tupac. So there are certain artists where I would just write down like what I heard. I heard the instruments before, but now I was starting to focus in on what they were actually saying. So I even got in trouble by writing some of the lyrics down because I didn't understand what it meant. I was just writing, you know, what I heard, trying to copy it to learn what they were saying. So it was more to learn and figure out everything about that song.
Yeah.
And yeah, at 12, we were sitting in a restaurant, just like maybe 15 different family members. We were all in a restaurant together. And while we were waiting for our food after we had ordered, my cousin and I pulled out a napkin and we just started to write. What was it about? I have no idea. But before I knew it, I had the whole napkin full. Like, I think we started like line for line, maybe trying to rhyme with each other and just trying to see what would happen. And before you knew it, she was coming up with another line and I just kept going. And, you know, she said, well, you filled your whole napkin. I'm still on, you know, line 3 or 4 and you've already filled your whole napkin. So when I read to her what I had, she was just like, wow, like that, you wrote that fast in that little amount of time. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I just kept going from there. And I had like the mini tape recorders, you know, the with the really small cassettes. So I would record myself on those just so I could hear it back because I wanted to hear what does my voice sound like. And
for a lot of us, the first time you hear your voice played back to you,
weird.
That's not what is that really what I sound like?
It's weird.
Yeah. So I mean, as a kid, I remember every time I would always feel embarrassed when I heard myself recorded because it was just
Yeah.
What that? No, that sounds so weird, right?
Yeah.
But to like for a young performer, you're already performing for other people, so you want to get used to it.
Right.
You want to get used to it as fast as you can.
Then instead of me like performing in front of people, now I'll walk around with the tape recorder and I'll press play and I'll say, listen to this. You know, check this out. Listen, listen. That's me singing this. That's me trying to rap this. You know, so and then I would say, and I wrote that.
Yeah.
You know, that's my song that I wrote.
Yeah.
But I mean, the whole song might be 30 seconds.
Right. So last week we talked a lot about getting feedback and how to take feedback.
Right.
So how did you so you were seeking people out. Here, I did this. What do you think of this?
Yeah.
What was kind of the response you got to start?
That's okay. You know, that's creative, but it wasn't a real recording. You know, it's on this distorted little. I mean, it's really like the size of your phone, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit slimmer, and there was a cassette tape, so I could rewind it, fast forward it, but it wasn't enough for them to really hear, well, do you have talent or not?
Right.
This was just, think people you would use them for college.
Yeah.
I think my dad had it like when he would go to class. So I took it from him and I would use it to record. But at 15, that's when things started to change. That's when I actually went to my studio for the first time and recorded my own song to an original beat, original lyrics. I did everything myself, and then that's when I learned also about like kind of the voiceovers of what ad-libs were. When you record a lead vocal and you have to get used to hearing yourself with a lead vocal, but then now you can actually double your voice and you can record the exact same thing and double everything, or you can double certain spots in the song and just do ad-libs. You can talk in the background. So basically we call it layering your vocal tracks. That was a whole nother world of exposure. So, as I get older, I get exposed to a whole new set of rules within music. Mm-hmm. And then measures. So if you're writing a chorus, it should be in a 4-bar measure or an 8-bar measure. People break the rules now when you hear like certain artists, they do a 16-bar measure of a chorus, which is kind of breaking the rules, but that's what music is about. So.
Yeah, you got to learn the rules before you can break them.
Before you can break them.
Yeah, because you have to understand why people do it the way they want it. They do it now, so that you can say, "Well, that's stupid. I don't want to do it that way."
Do it that way.
You don't want to just jump into, "Oh, people are stupid. I'm really smart." Because you don't really. You got to get the experience before you can say something like that.
You have to know why it all works, and it's all broken into segments. Yeah. If you really look at it, it's all measurements throughout an entire song.
Yeah.
But that's what also keeps the timing, right? Which is a whole nother thing, tempo and timing within a song, and those measurements keep us in time.
And now what you would call a measurement is we would call a phrase in class,
right?
Which you might even call you might have a phrase within a chorus. A chorus could have 2 phrases within it, or a verse could have 2 phrases or 3 or 4 usually, but it's usually in a pop song, especially going to be an even number. It's symmetrical. So that's really cool. So at 14, you went in, you started working on this track, but then you actually started to try and market this, and so describe, because you went out, you got a lot of feedback, and then you started to actually try and put it out there. How did that go about?
So, I mean, as in now, like with the the 104.9 and KMEL. So at 15, we were trying to get to the local radio stations. We have Q93 down south, and even before just getting to them to play the song, there were these different programs on the radio. So at 8 o'clock, they would have what is called the Hot 888, the hottest songs in the country. They would play those 8 songs. You could call and vote for them. But then following those 8, there was the 9 o'clock props. So the 9 o'clock props is where you try to call in, a number of people are all calling in, and you try to basically either rap or sing or perform your song over the phone live on the radio. But the funny part is...
Talk about pressure, man.
Right, that's pressure in itself. But now you have to battle somebody, and that's why they say 9 o'clock props. So there's this battle, and then other callers get to call in and vote on who won the battle. So it's a 2-round battle, I would go, then the next person would go, then I would go again, the next person goes, and then we just wait on hold on the phone, nervous, sweating, waiting to see, you know, that I win or not. Can I come back next week? So the first time I actually got on the show, I lost. But I think I stumbled over the words, and they said, well, it was good what he did, but, you know, he messed up, and the other dude didn't mess up, so we have to say the other dude won.
Yeah.
So I went back, and I started writing again. I recited it for like 2 or 3 weeks, made sure that I knew it down, and then I came back a couple of weeks later, and that time I won. So I was invited, you know, to come back the following week. So that in itself taught me that there's a lot of competition in music, that at some point you have to be able to perform it live. Like I know you guys do concerts, and I mean, you have to be ready because the audience is there and they're waiting to be entertained.
Yeah.
And it all starts with you by yourself alone. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like even in music class, right? When I was playing piano as a senior, that's only 50 minutes.
Yep.
Right? Or 45 minutes. That's not going to teach you to become a professional piano player.
Nope.
So it's all about that individual practice at home. Like even writing. I mean, I write at home all the time. I'm writing in the shower, in the car. I'm always writing.
Even if it's in your head, you're still creating it, and that's also what we're talking about when we're talking about writing. You're not just at your journal writing it down. Right. But if it's in your head, you're like, man, this would go really well with this, and this is the idea I have. Like you're writing, even if you're not doing the physical act of writing.
But what's funny is, you may walk around and you're just thinking about these things, and then when you actually go to write what you were thinking, you have a half a page. So you have what we would call like 8 bars of a verse. A 16-bar verse, you have half the verse already written, and you haven't written anything on paper yet. Yeah. So,
but you're sitting there going over it over and over because you don't want to forget it.
Right, you don't want to forget it. And that, I mean, some people really have that talent. Like in the music industry, I mean, everybody knows Jay-Z, where he doesn't physically write. Yeah. Where he just thinks of it and he memorizes it in his head, and then he'll go and record it. Yeah. So it's a skill.
It definitely is a skill. And I know for me, when I was in college, I was taking, if I took a 16-unit load, which is what we would consider full-time, it's basically, for most people, it's like 4 or 5 classes. Right. That meet over the course of a week, maybe 2 or 3 times. Well, a music major has to take more like 24 units because our load was so heavy, which means that one semester I was taking 11 classes a week, which meant 2 to 3 times every week, and I just was slammed. And then on top of that, that's like 30 hours just of being in class. So imagine you're in school right now. You're at school for 6 hours every day. 6 times 5, that's 30 hours, right? So I'm doing that, or in college you're doing that, maybe even a little bit more, plus all the homework you got to do at home. Then guess what? If you're an instrumentalist or you're a musician, you're practicing at least 20 hours on top of that. At least.
The same thing with an athlete. I would tell any basketball player, you should be dribbling for like an hour at night. Any football player, you should be throwing, or you should be running routes and catching the ball for an hour. Any musician, you should be playing the violin for an hour. You should be playing the piano for an hour. You should be playing the drums for an hour. You have to practice. We were talking about like the writing and not actually, physically writing it down. I had a professor named Kid Jordan at Southern University, where I went to college in Louisiana, and he wrote jazz but wouldn't physically write it. He would just play it. And it's kind of what you call freestyling, where you just play what comes to mind. What we learned is he wasn't freestyling. He wrote this stuff a while ago, or he wrote it before class and came in and played it to us.
But he didn't write it down.
But he didn't write it down. Like there were no notes written, no staff, nothing. He just he knew what he wanted to play. He knew what it was. But I mean, he's a professional jazz player, so he's
And we guitarists do this all the time. Whenever you talk about improvising, jazz players, you talk about improvising all the time. And the first time someone tells you improvisation is when you make up a melody or you make up music on the spot. I remember for me as a young musician, I thought, these guys are insane. They're so much better than I will ever be in my entire life. It was that scary. And as my music career went on and I practiced, I'm practicing at certain points in my life where all I did was play music. I'm practicing 40 hours a day to do, maybe 2 gigs a week for an hour or 2. So my actual, where I got paid, I was only working like 2 or 3 hours, but to get to that part to get paid, I was working like 80 hours a week. Right. But going back to improvisation, some of these things you've thought of long before you ever played it. You know what it sounds like. You might have even practiced it. For guitar players, you're practicing what this melody is going to sound like. For a trumpet or saxophone player, you practice what this melody is going to sound like. So then you come over and you start playing. The music starts happening, and you've got some muscle memory already ready to go. Right. And that's part of writing too. There. That's part of writing too.
Yep. Definitely.
So let's see. You got to write for some Disney artists. Tell me about how that happened. Tell me about how that happened.
So I used to live in Pasadena and met a few different people, a couple producers, and I came across this group of writers, and it was mainly R&B and pop singers, and just kind of stumbled upon this group through this producer, and they were writing for Disney artists. I had no idea what that meant.
So before that, tell me how did you meet them? Because you told me this great story about you're a Southern boy, and so when you walk into the room, what happened?
So, where everybody's there. These guys have been writing together for a while, and I'm there more just observing. I was invited to just come and watch how the session goes. So I'm listening and watching how things are going, and the producer puts on a beat or puts on some music, and the writers, they kind of talk about it, and then they maybe start to write some things down or jot things down. So I'm watching just to figure out how does this all work. Well, somebody comes up with a couple lyrics, somebody comes up with the melody, somebody says, oh, I have a cool rhythm for this part, I think I know how the bridge can go. So as I observe, I kind of take notes. I come back the next time, and same thing. They put on the music, and they start going through that process. And the producer asks, "Okay, does anybody have anything yet?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." And they weren't expecting me to have anything because I had never been invited to write as a part of this team. But I just jumped in, and I told them, well, I have a chorus, so I let them hear the chorus. I kind of sang it out for them and let them hear what I had, and they liked it. Who knew that they would like it? And from then on, I was a part of that writing collective. And they invited me to write on several different songs that they were pitching to Disney artists. We would have some of the artists come into the studio, and we would actually help them, to learn the song and to sing the song, record the songs. We had their parents come in, and we had to do contracts and all of the business sides of it. And then also I wanted to touch on like how the publishing aspect works. Yeah. So when we're writing for another artist, you actually get paid when that song sells. So there's publishing, and you have these different agencies, collection agencies like BMI and ASCAP. And through this group, I learned that I needed to start a publishing company as a writer and try to have my own publishing company. Which, if you ask people right now, do you have your own publishing company? Usually they don't. But at 22, I had my own publishing company, which is, it's kind of unheard of. And I was an established writer under my own publishing company. And
so you had basically incorporated all your work so that this makes business sense to incorporate your work. And the Beatles did it. They had Apple Records, and there's all these huge stuff going on with Apple Records because when the Beatles had to sell, Michael Jackson ended up buying the rights to all their music because they didn't personally own all their music anymore. It was incorporated, right. But it just makes business sense because you're protecting yourself from unnecessary taxes and things
Right.
like that.
Right.
And you're making sure that you're collecting on the work that you've done.
That I've done. And maintaining full ownership over all of my work, which is, I mean, that's important, because you don't want other people to get rich off of what you've put. So, I mean, you don't mind if they get rich, but you want to get rich as well.
Yeah.
You don't want them to be the only people who are getting rich. You would like to see a return on your investment. And your investment is your time and energy that you're putting into your music.
And your love, frankly.
Love, right.
You gotta love your project.
Blood, sweat, and tears
Yep.
is what they say.
So, and it goes to show that you see the performer all the time. The performer is right there front and center. You see Taylor Swift, you see Justin Bieber, you see these big pop artists, and you're like, man, they're so amazing. Their music speaks to me, right?
Right.
And they're trained to give these performances. They have so many people that creates that product. It's not just that person. That person is the face, and they're very important to that product.
Right.
But James, how many people were on this writing team?
Oh, we had like 8 people.
So 8 people just for writing.
Right, yeah.
And that's
And different parts.
lyric stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that was
Lyrics.
that even the music?
Even composing, because sometimes we would say, you know what, I think we should bring in a live bass player.
There you go.
And have them play on this song. Or, you know what, I like the piano line you have there, but I think we should add a different piano. Or the texture of that piano, we think that's kind of off. Maybe we should change the pitch of the piano. Maybe instead of playing in, I don't know, in E, maybe we should play in a C. I mean, there's so many different technical things that could go along with it as well. Maybe we should add guitar on this part, or maybe. So, I mean, in building a song, it's kind of like a movie, where the movie never really has to stop. It could go on for days, right? If the writer decides to just keep writing and writing and writing. Like, how many Harry Potter books do they have? Like 7 of them, and they're all 300 or 400 pages.
7 or 8.
So if they want to, they can continue to go. Same thing with the song. Like some songs, I mean, we think about vinyl records.
Yeah.
One song might be 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
So the song's never really over. It's what you decide to do with it when you say, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
Same thing when you're creating it. You can keep adding. I mean, it may get cluttered at some point where, you have instruments all on top of each other. But in some jazz records, you may hear all kinds of stuff. Like a painting. You have this blank canvas, and then you can put as much texture on it as you want to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
but you
oil
can
painting.
also peel away.
Yeah, in oil painting, you can actually see the texture on what the paint that's globbed up there.
Right.
You might never know what's underneath it. It might have started out as something completely different, but then that texture, suddenly, what the end product is completely different than the original. And when we talked about, know the rules before you break the rules.
Right.
So you have to know your form when you're going in. So if we're writing, we're talking like rap or pop or something like that. There's a pretty defined form that you're going into.
There is.
So
there's a structure there.
So you might look at it like a math formula. To have a complete song, we have to have this component, this component, this component, and this component. What those components are made up of, though, is completely up to the composer, up to the writer, both lyrically and musically. So that's where your personal twist really happens. That's where, your soul gets to speak.
It's kind of like a movie. You always have the point in the movie, like the conflict or the climax of a movie, where it kind of reaches its point, and then things kind of settle down. Same thing in music. Like usually a bridge or the chorus before the bridge is like this huge moment, and then you kind of mellow out again as the song ends. It ends of the outro.
Or if you're really lazy, you do the radio fade out. Right? The song just keeps going. We just turn the volume down. And in movies especially, we have when you talk about movie writing, you talk a lot about this dark night of the soul, where the main character, it's like all hope is lost and there's no way that you're going to succeed in what you're doing, and then something happens where the character believes, I can do it, and then you have like the big fight scene, and they overcome whatever the big conflict is, and then everything resolves. So it's that heightened tension. We're going to talk about in class, and if you're not in class with me, we talk about dominant chords. It's like this big dominant chord that's dissonant, and you're like, oh God, what's gonna happen? And then finally we have
really dramatic and build up. Yeah.
And then we have resolution. So
Yep.
there's so much work that goes into songwriting. And you look at the average pop song is what, like 3 minutes long?
Yeah.
There's so much
Hours
work.
of work that's going into
It's
those songs.
ridiculous. It's like, think of an iceberg. The work you see might be this much, but the work that happened is just
Gigantic.
enormous. Man hours. There's so many people who
And that's not the first version. Yeah. It's just like writing an English paper, draft 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
You might hear certain things. I mean, when you listen to certain Michael Jackson records,
Mm-hmm.
Quincy Jones has like this commentary where he's talking about how they created some of these songs, and what you hear on the first record, you don't even hear on the final version of that song. You don't even hear those things. Yeah. Oh, it was maybe just a demo tape, so now you hear a lot more on it. So, I mean, sometimes you take away from music, sometimes you add to it.
Yeah. That's crazy. Speaking of Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson, I was talking to a buddy of mine about Thriller. And they really, Thriller is like, we look at Thriller as kind of this monumental pop album that is just amazing.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't listened to Michael Jackson's Thriller, stop whatever you're doing, turn off this video, go listen to Thriller. Go listen to Thriller. Watch the music video for Thriller. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But they really thought of this as kind of a rock album.
Yeah.
If you look into it, Eddie Van Halen plays all the guitar.
Yeah.
On Thriller, and in Eddie's infinite wisdom or not, for you to decide, he decided not to take the royalties for Thriller, which became one of the best-selling albums of all time.
Right.
But you can listen to Thriller with this backbeat.
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, 1, 2, bum, 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 right?
Yep.
And it's when we're talking about how music grew from folk into what we see as pop music today, you can see it right in Thriller if you really look at it.
Yeah.
So I love that, because Thriller, it's like, oh, I love that album. It's so good.
I mean, interesting story on that. The guy who you hear on the actual, you have the album Thriller, and then you have the song Thriller. Mm-hmm. The guy who does the voice at the very end, the real creepy voice, he talks about like his experience going into the studio and trying to be creepy enough. But he's a star from I don't know if it was the Munsters, but he's a horror film actor.
Yeah.
So they purposely brought him in to just add that creepiness, to the end of the song. So you never know, like you bring in so many different people to work on a song. He's not a musician, but they needed his voice. It was scary enough to where it would make the song really come to life. Because everybody loves the end of the song.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this cool
and
little
that
narration.
Laugh,
yeah. I can't do it. It's awful. But you know what? So we've got so much more material we can talk about. Let's call it for today, and then James, I'd like to have you back so that we can continue this, because man, there's just so much cool stuff we can talk about. I want to talk about your time in the studio, like you actually creating your own songs, and maybe see about we can talk about some of the booking that you do too.
Okay.
All right.
Like the performances.
Yeah.
Performance shows. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna call it there.
Okay.
James, thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thanks for watching Welly's World, guys.